Have you ever been depressed? Ever wondered if you're depressed? Are you anxious a lot of the time? Do you know someone who struggles with depression or anxiety? If you didn't say yes at least once, you're a very rare and lucky person. Johns Hopkins University writes, an estimated 26% of Americans ages 18 and older, about 1 in 4 adults, suffers from a diagnosable mental disorder in any given year. Do you maybe know someone who struggles with addiction? Have you ever wondered if you're struggling with addiction after binge watching the 1,000,000th episode of something on Netflix or pouring another 2 hours of your lifetime into Facebook or Instagram? This guy here, Johann Hari, gave a TED Talk about 6 years ago on the topic of addiction, and he concluded by saying that the opposite of addiction is connection. Well, now he has written a book about lost connections, or at least I finally read it now. I think it already came out 2018 actually. If you agree with me that depression and anxiety cause a ton of suffering in our world, and that it is our most pressing and challenging and rewarding goal to reduce that suffering, then I think you might also agree with me that this book might just be the most important book of, I don't know, maybe even my lifetime or yours. So what makes this book so darn important? Well, after reading it, you will be able to see, understand, and explain why there is so much suffering going on in our culture, why these mental health statistics are going through the roof, why people actually talk about an epidemic of mental illness for some years now already. As an increasingly globalized society, we are going down roads further and further that can only lead us to unhappiness, because at those places where these roads lead us, our most important shared basic human needs just can't fully be met. In Hari's own words, you aren't a machine with broken parts. You are an animal whose needs are not being met. You need to have a community. You need to have meaningful values, not the junk values you've been pumped full of all your life, telling you happiness comes through money and buying objects. You need a secure future. You need connections to all these things. You need to release any shame you might feel for having been mistreated. Every human being has these needs, and in our culture, we're relatively good at meeting physical needs. Almost nobody actually starves, for example, which is an extraordinary achievement. But we've become quite bad at meeting these psychological needs. That's a crucial reason why you and so many of the people around you are depressed and anxious. But that's actually only half of why this book is so important, because after reading part 2 of it, you'll not only know why your anxiety and depression actually make a ton of sense, but you'll also know about several evidence-based countermeasures. And while some of these are open to you anytime, any place, what Hari and myself really advocate for is making it a collective priority to change our ways for the better. Because going down that road by yourself can be a real struggle. Some of us are like natural outlaws, and they don't mind going against culture. They might even enjoy it a little bit. But for the most of us, we expect culture to work for us, and rightfully so. And especially for all the people who are already depressed, drained, fatigued, burned out, it's so hard to generate the motivation to do some rebellious acts of self-care. My initial idea for the name of this channel was actually Self-Care Rebels. You know, how to take good care of yourself within a culture that puts obstacles in your way constantly. But then I thought, no, fuck this culture of pressure, of lack, of not enough. We deserve to feel that we really are enough every day, because we are. If you want to start with a rebellious act of self-care though, I created a value inventory template, which is a great start to restore the lost connection to meaningful values. I put the download link for that in the description. Beyond that, I obviously implore you to read this brilliant, hopefully world-changing book. And when you've done so, I really hope that you will take a stance for the solutions that this book points to. Take good care of yourself as well as you can, and take care of others who suffer just like you as well as you can. And if you feel like the projects might be just too big, like we'll never have democratic workplaces, we'll never have universal basic income, we will never shed our capitalistic values, I want to leave you with a story from the book's conclusion. Maybe it helps. In 1993, the journalist Andrew Sullivan was diagnosed as HIV positive. It was the height of the AIDS crisis. Gay men were dying all over the world. There was no treatment in sight. Andrew's first thought was, I deserve this. I brought it on myself. He had been raised in a Catholic family in a homophobic culture in which, as a child, he thought he was the only gay person in the whole world, because he never saw anyone like him on TV or in the streets or in books. He lived in a world where if you were lucky, being gay was a punchline, and if you were unlucky, it got you a punch in the face. So now he thought, I had it coming. This fatal disease is the punishment I deserve. Not long after, he left his job as editor of one of the leading magazines in the United States, The New Republic. His closest friend, Patrick, was dying of AIDS. The fate Andrew was now sure awaited him. So Andrew went to Provincetown, the gay enclave at the tip of Cape Cod in Massachusetts, to die. That summer, in a small house near the beach, he began to write a book. He knew it would be the last thing he ever did, so he decided to write something advocating a crazy, preposterous idea, one so outlandish that nobody had ever written a book about it before. He was going to propose that gay people should be allowed to get married, just like straight people. He thought this would be the only way to free gay people from the self-hatred and shame that had trapped Andrew himself. It's too late for me, he thought, but maybe it will help the people who come after me. When the book, Virtually Normal, came out a year later, Patrick died when it had only been in the bookstores for a few days, and Andrew was widely ridiculed for suggesting something so absurd as gay marriage. Andrew was attacked not just by right-wingers, but by many gay left-wingers who said he was a sellout, a wannabe heterosexual, a freak for believing in marriage. A group called the Lesbian Avengers turned up to protest at his events with his face in the crosshairs of a gun. Andrew looked out at the crowd and despaired. This mad idea, his last gesture before dying, was clearly going to come to nothing. When I hear people saying that the changes we need to make in order to deal with depression and anxiety can't happen, I imagine going back in time to the summer of 1993, to that beach house in Provincetown, and telling Andrew something. Okay, Andrew, you're not going to believe me, but this is what is going to happen next. 25 years from now, you'll be alive. I know, it's amazing, but wait, that's not the best part. This book you've written, it's going to spark a movement, and this book, it's going to be quoted in a key Supreme Court ruling declaring marriage equality for gay people. And I'm going to be with you and your future husband the day after you receive a letter from the President of the United States telling you that this fight for gay marriage that you started has succeeded in part because of you. He's going to light up the White House like the rainbow flag that day. He's going to invite you to have dinner there to thank you for what you've done. Oh, and by the way, that president, he's going to be black. It would have seemed like science fiction, but it happened. It's not a small thing to overturn 2,000 years of gay people being jailed and scorned and beaten and burned. It happened for one reason only. Because enough brave people banded together and demanded it. So I told myself, if you hear a thought in your head telling you that we can't deal with the social causes of depression and anxiety, you should stop and realize that's a symptom of the depression and anxiety itself. Yes, the changes we need now are huge. They're about the size of the revolution in how gay people were treated. But that revolution happened. There's a huge fight ahead of us to really deal with these problems. But that's because it's a huge crisis. We can deny that, but then we'll stay trapped in the problem. Andrew taught me, the response to a huge crisis isn't to go home and weep. It's to go big. It's to demand something that seems impossible and not rest until you've achieved it. Such traffic. I'm in the tiniest village. Mäuschen, I have to take this from you. I give this back in a moment.